God's chosen ones, 7 hidden pains that set you apart, and heaven knew you could carry them. She didn't ask for this. The desert, the silence, the way the phone stopped ringing and people disappeared without saying goodbye. There was a time she laughed loud in rooms that no longer invite her. A time when prayers came easy and answers came quickly. But now? Now she wakes up wondering if she's the only one who feels this lost. The texts go unanswered. The worship feels hollow, and the mirror, it reflects someone who's still standing but barely breathing. And yet, somehow, she knows this isn't just heartbreak. It's not just bad timing. This is something sacred, something set apart, because deep in her soul, beneath the ache, beneath the ashes, she hears it. A whisper that doesn't come from this world. You are not broken, you are becoming. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. She wipes her tears, clutches her journal, and steps barefoot into the desert again, not because she wants to, but because something greater is calling her through it. And you, if you felt this too, if your loneliness feels holy, if your pain feels prophetic, then maybe this isn't just her story. Maybe it's yours. Because the ones God chooses, He breaks before He crowns. And if that's you, then this message was written in heaven with your name on it. Before the fire, there was the silence. There are deserts no GPS can map. Places where the phone stops buzzing, the world stops noticing, and you begin to question whether God has gone silent, or if you just stopped being seen. Grace didn't plan to walk into one. It wasn't a rebellious season. She wasn't running from God. She was doing everything right, or so she thought. Still going to church, still tithing, still praying the way she was taught. But everything started to unravel in ways she couldn't explain. First came the quiet withdrawals, friends who slowly ghosted, as if her presence had become too heavy for their atmosphere. Then the work drama, then the family tension, then the prayers that felt like they never left the ceiling. And most painful of all, the God who once felt so close now felt impossibly distant. It didn't make sense. Why would obedience lead to heartbreak? Why would faithfulness lead to silence? She tried to explain it once, over coffee with a friend from church. "I just feel like I'm disappearing," she confessed. The friend smiled politely, shifted in her chair, and offered a half-hearted, "Well, maybe it's just a season." But Grace knew it was more than a season. It was a severing, a spiritual surgery, a pruning that went deeper than disappointments. It felt like heaven was pulling her apart. One night she opened her Bible and let it fall to whatever page it wanted. It landed in Isaiah 43. "As you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior." She stared at the verse like it was trying to whisper something just for her. And that night, for the first time in weeks, she whispered back, "Are you still there?" No answer. Not out loud anyway. But a strange peace filled the room. The kind that doesn't fix anything, but also doesn't let you fall apart. It wasn't long after that when she began to notice it. Patterns, signs, shifts. It was as if the pain she once resented had become a portal, not to answers, but to awareness. The isolation? It was sacred separation. The longing? It was divine preparation. The silence? It was the language of refinement. Because God doesn't raise His generals in green rooms. He shakes them in wildernesses no one applauds. Then maybe that's where you are too. Maybe your life doesn't look broken, but inside you're bleeding from wounds no one sees. Maybe you've cried in your car after church. Maybe you've watched people get blessed while you're still battling. Maybe you've felt that invisible weight, the one that no sermon ever fully names, but your soul recognizes instantly. If that's you, let me be the voice that finds you in your wilderness. You're not broken, you're being branded. You're not forgotten, you've been marked. Because chosen ones are rarely recognized at first. Just ask Joseph, who dreamed in color and got thrown in a pit for it. Just ask Esther, who had to hide her identity until heaven said now. Just ask Elijah, who called down fire, then collapsed under a tree begging to disappear. Being chosen doesn't mean being celebrated. Sometimes it means walking through 7 kinds of pain that no one else understands, but God intentionally allows. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. And that's where this story truly begins. Because today, we're not just naming those pains, we're unveiling the divine purpose behind each one. The 7 silent agonies that mark God's most dangerous vessels. The hidden scars that don't disqualify you, they're heaven's signature on your soul. Each pain is a doorway. Each tear is a seed. Each ache is an altar. And you, dear soul, are about to discover that everything you thought was breaking you was actually building you. Take a deep breath. Let the world go quiet for a moment. You're not watching this by accident. This message, it was sent for the ones who still believe, even when everything hurts. For the ones who wake up heavy but still get out of bed. For the ones who don't feel strong but refuse to give up. If you're still here, still breathing, still hoping, heaven saw it. Heaven is still watching, and heaven is not finished. Next, we'll walk through the first doorway, the isolation that came without warning. But just know this, if you've been misunderstood, overlooked, or quietly broken, you weren't being abandoned. You were being separated for something sacred. Because the ones God uses most are often the ones he hides longest. Part 1. The isolation that came without warning. She didn't notice it all at once. At first it was just the little things. A friend who took longer to text back. A group chat that slowly stopped including her. Sunday mornings where the pew beside her stayed empty. She brushed it off as life being busy. People get distracted, she thought. They're probably just going through their own things. But then came the silence. The kind that settles into your phone like dust. The kind where even when you're in a room full of people, you feel like a ghost no one sees. Grace kept asking herself what she did wrong. She hadn't changed, not really. Still showed up, still prayed, still tried to be the kind of friend she wished others would be. But somehow the air between her and the world had shifted. She'd scroll through old conversations trying to pinpoint the moment things started to fade. There was no argument, no falling out, just an invisible curtain being drawn, one relationship at a time. And when she prayed, the silence echoed louder. One night, wrapped in a blanket on her porch, she looked up at the sky and whispered, "God, where did everybody go?" No reply, not in words, not in signs, but deep inside, something stirred. A quiet truth, one she didn't want to accept at first. They didn't leave because she was broken. They left because heaven was setting her apart. Still, it hurt. Some mornings she'd wake up and wonder if she was becoming the problem. Maybe she was too intense. Maybe she loved too deeply. Maybe she cared too much. But the truth? She was starting to see too clearly. She couldn't laugh at the same jokes. Couldn't enjoy the same shallow conversations. Couldn't force herself into rooms where the spirit no longer felt welcome. She hadn't chosen the distance, but she was beginning to realize it had chosen her. Jesus knew this pain too. She read it in Matthew one morning, the words glowing off the page. Isn't this the carpenter's son? It wasn't the strangers who doubted him. It was the ones closest, the ones who watched him grow up, the ones who couldn't see the divine in someone they thought they understood. Even the Son of God wasn't immune to being dismissed. That verse hit her like a thunderclap, and suddenly it all made sense. The friends who fell silent, the family who didn't understand, the church people who only embraced her when she didn't speak too boldly. This wasn't rejection, it was protection. She met with her mentor that week, an older woman named Lillian who always carried peace like perfume. After listening quietly, Lillian leaned in and said, "Grace, you're not being cast aside, you're being kept." That phrase cracked something open. Kept. Not rejected, not punished. Kept. For the first time, Grace stopped fighting the silence. She began to notice something sacred in it, something soft, like God had hushed the crowd so she could finally hear his voice again. She started walking alone, on purpose, not to escape, but to listen. There were days she still missed the familiar voices, moments she'd stare at her phone, fingers hovering over names she used to call without thinking. But instead of reaching out, she'd reach inward, open her journal, light a candle, whisper, "What do you want me to hear today?" And heaven always answered, not with noise, but with knowing. The kind of knowing that says, "You're not behind, you're not forgotten, you're not too much, you're becoming." Grace stopped shrinking herself to stay connected to places her spirit had outgrown. She let them go, not in bitterness, but in blessing. Let them go, because she finally understood. Some connections are only for certain seasons. There's some losses. They're actually graduations. She no longer needed constant affirmation to believe she was chosen. She didn't need a group chat to know she wasn't alone. She had become her own sanctuary. And more than that, she had discovered God waiting for her there, in the space everyone else had left behind. There was no big moment, no climax, just a deep breath one ordinary night when she looked around and didn't feel sad anymore. She felt free, and that was the real miracle. Part 2. The loneliness that led to revelation. Grace didn't expect the ache to linger. After she made peace with the silence, after the texts stopped hurting and the absence became a rhythm, she thought the pain would leave too. But it didn't. It followed her like a shadow, not loud, but present. There were days she was surrounded by people. The kind of days where laughter echoed in the background, conversations buzzed around her, and yet she felt strangely unseen, like she was watching life through a glass wall. Everyone else seemed satisfied with the surface. Small talk, shallow prayers, casual faith. She craved something deeper. Not perfection, just presence. The kind that moves through a room like wind. The kind that stills the chaos in your chest. She missed that. But more than that, she missed being known. She could be in the middle of a crowded sanctuary and still feel like a stranger. And not because others were cold. No. The shaking, the hurt, the fear, the ethic. But their kindness couldn't touch the ache she carried. There was a language in her spirit that no one else around her spoke, and it made her feel like an outsider in her own skin. One night she tried to put it into words. She sat on her bed, turned her phone face down, and whispered, "God, why do I feel so alone when surrounded? No thunder, no vision, just a quiet memory." The prophet Jeremiah. He had spoken God's truth in a nation that didn't want to hear it. He wasn't praised, he wasn't celebrated. He was isolated. Grace reached for her Bible, found his words. I sat alone because your hand was on me. That verse landed in her chest like a key in a lock. That was it. She wasn't forgotten. She was set apart. The next morning, she walked through her neighborhood as the sun rose. No music, no distractions. Just the sound of her own feet and the gentle whisper of wind through leaves. And that's when she heard it. Not audibly, not with her ears, but with something deeper. A whisper that didn't come from her mind, but from the marrow of her bones. You're not lonely because you're unloved. You're lonely because you are called to carry something most can't see. She stopped in her tracks, eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of recognition. This is holy. She began to see it differently after that. The empty Friday nights, altars. The cancelled plans, invitations. The conversations that couldn't go deep. Reminders that her depth wasn't a curse, it was a gift. She started journaling again, not just her thoughts, but her prayers, her questions, her revelations. She began lighting candles before bed, creating space for quiet conversations with heaven. And it was there, in the absence of noise, that something began to bloom. Clarity, purpose. She wasn't lonely. She was being rewired. Every time she sat in that silence, heaven poured something into her. Not all at once, not in visions and fireworks, but in breadcrumbs. A verse, a memory, a prompting, a phrase that wouldn't leave her spirit for days. One night, she wrote, "Maybe I'm not meant to be understood right now. Maybe I'm meant to be built. And that building needs silence. It needs space. It needs solitude." Jesus went to the mountain alone. Moses climbed alone. Even Elijah ran to the cave alone. Maybe loneliness wasn't the problem. Maybe loneliness was the tool. And that shift changed everything. She stopped asking, "Why is no one here?" and started asking, "What are you saying now that no one else is talking?" She started turning off her phone for entire mornings. She sat in the garden with her coffee and just listened. She watched birds more than social feeds. She started to hear again, to feel again. Not the chaos of the world, but the rhythm of God. A few weeks later, a friend messaged her out of nowhere. "You've seemed quiet lately, but there's something different about you. Peaceful, like you're glowing or something." Grace smiled softly at the screen. She didn't explain. How could she? How do you explain that you met God in your loneliness? That while others pitied your silence, he was speaking through it? So she just wrote back, "Yeah, I've been spending more time in stillness. It's been good." But her spirit said more than that. The spirit said, "I've been with the architect. He's been rebuilding me in the quiet." And so the ache didn't fully leave, but it transformed from a wound into a well, from an ache into an altar. She didn't fear loneliness anymore. She welcomed it, because in that holy hush, she discovered the voice that never leaves, the one who sees her fully, the one who never misunderstands her, the one who doesn't need words to understand the language of her soul. She no longer needed a crowd to feel chosen. She no longer needed applause to know she was anointed, because in the silence, God gave her back herself. Part 3. The inner war that never let up. No one could see it. She looked fine, calm, composed, faithful. She still prayed, still worshipped, still smiled when someone asked how she was doing. But beneath the surface there was a storm, a war with no name, a quiet tug of war between who she used to be and who God was calling her to become. She would wake up with good intentions. She wanted to be kind, holy, patient, pure. But then the day would unfold, and thoughts she didn't invite would sneak in. Words she regretted would slip from her mouth. Old fears would rise like smoke from somewhere she thought had already burned down. And when the dusk settled, she'd whisper into her pillow, "Am I still like this? Why am I still fighting things I already surrendered? If I'm chosen, why do I still feel so conflicted?" No one warned her about the inner war. The sermons told her to be victorious. The worship songs told her to declare freedom. But they never mentioned the guilt that creeps in at 2 men. They never said that becoming holy would feel like being torn open. She thought choosing God once would make the battle easier. But instead, the closer she got, the more intense the fight became. It wasn't sin in the loud, obvious ways. It was subtle. It was shadowy. It was the constant pull of fear in one direction and faith in the other. She could stand in front of people and speak life, then go home and wonder if she was a fraud. She could post scripture online, then cry in secret because she still couldn't forgive that one person. And every time she stumbled, the enemy's voice would whisper, "See, you're not chosen. You're a hypocrite. You're a disappointment to God. Everyone sees strength, but you know you're weak." And for a while she believed it. She sat in shame, wearing silence like a cloak, afraid that even God had grown tired of her inconsistency. But then one day she read something in Romans that lit a fire in her chest. "For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing." Psalm 7:19. And suddenly she saw it. Paul, the apostle, the warrior, the giant of the faith. Even he had an inner war. Even he wrestled with the gap between intention and action. This wasn't weakness. This was proof of spiritual life. Dead hearts don't struggle. Numb souls don't feel the pull. But the chosen, the ones being refined, they feel everything. Because they care. Because they haven't given up. And so she stopped hiding her battle. Not to glorify the pain, but to honor the process. She stopped pretending she had to be perfect to be useful. She started showing up, even with her wounds. She began praying, even when her heart wasn't steady, because she knew that praying through the war was still obedience. People, she learned to tell the truth. God, I still feel bitter. God, I still want to give up. God, I still don't feel worthy. And in that raw, tear-soaked honesty, he met her. Not with rebuke, not with shame, but with gentle, steady presence. "I'm not afraid of your weakness," he whispered. "I'm not surprised by your war. I'm the one who's training you in it." From that day on, the inner war did, but she stopped mistaking it for failure. She started recognizing it as formation. Every time she chose silence over retaliation, that was victory. Every time she forgave when bitterness screamed, that was victory. Every time she returned to the altar instead of running from it, that was victory. Heaven wasn't watching for perfection. Heaven was watching for surrender. And day by day, choice by choice, something unshakable began to form inside her. Build confidence in herself, but confidence in God's grace inside her. She stopped performing and started partnering. She stopped asking, "Why am I still like this?" and started declaring, "God's still working in me, and I'm not giving up." Now, when the war rises in her chest, she doesn't panic. She breathes. She remembers that even battlefields can become sanctuaries when you know who's fighting for you, and that sometimes the most chosen people are the ones who never stop choosing God, even when their hands are trembling. Part 4. The pain of renunciation. She didn't expect obedience to feel like heartbreak, but there she was, staring at something she once called home, and knowing she had to walk away from it. It wasn't toxic. It wasn't sinful. It was good, beautiful even, but it wasn't where God was anymore, and that was enough. Renunciation didn't come with fireworks. It came with silence, with aching, with a slow, sacred realization that to say yes to the next thing, she'd have to release what she once thought was forever. She had been holding on tight to the dream, to the person, to the community that once lit her soul. But lately it had grown quiet inside those spaces, too quiet. And one night, as she prayed, more out of habit than hunger, she felt it, that whisper, that nudge, the knowing that wouldn't let her stay still anymore. It's time to let go. She tried to reason. But this was from you? But I prayed for this. It used to bring me joy. But heaven didn't argue. Heaven simply waited. Because some things were from God for a season, and now the season had shifted. Letting go didn't mean the thing was bad. It meant she had changed. And what used to be right was no longer aligned. She sat in her car for an hour outside the coffee shop where she'd planned to meet someone she loved, someone who had once been a daily part of her life. They hadn't done anything wrong. But every time she prayed about continuing the connection, her spirit felt heavy. And that morning she knew it would be the last time. She walked in, sat across from them, smiled. They talked like usual, laughed like usual. But something in her heart was already saying goodbye. When they hugged at the end, she whispered, silently, soul deep, "Thank you, God. I release them back to you." Renunciation doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it comes with obedience, and an ache you have to carry into the night. She went home, cried, questioned. Why does saying yes to you always feel like losing so much? But even through the weeping, she knew this was holy, because not all sacrifices are dramatic. Some are quiet, invisible. Some are simply decisions made in secret that echo through eternity. She remembered Abraham, how God asked him not just to leave his land, but to offer his son. Not because God wanted Isaac to die, but because he wanted to see if Abraham's heart would choose the giver over the gift. She clung to that story. "This hurts, but I trust you." And the moment she spoke those words, trembling, tear-soaked, terrified, she felt it. A strange, deep peace. The kind that doesn't erase the ache, but honors it. The kind of peace that only follows sacrifice. Over the next few weeks, her life looked emptier. Fewer texts, less noise, a smaller calendar. But something unexpected began to bloom in the space where people and plans had once lived. Clarity, stillness, presence. She had more time to hear God, more space to create, more room to become who she really was, without performing for people she was never called to keep. The losses no longer felt like death. They felt like transplanting, like being moved to better soil. Letting go wasn't weakness, it was alignment. It was telling heaven, "I trust you more than I trust what I built." It was living out the truth that what we surrender for God, He always redeems in ways we never imagine. Now, when something begins to feel misaligned, When her spirit starts to tighten in places that used to feel like home, she doesn't fight it. She listens. She loosens her grip. She blesses what was, because she knows, if God asks for it. So it's only because He's about to release something greater, not always louder, not always bigger, but always truer, always more in tune with her real assignment. Letting go still hurts sometimes. She still misses pieces of what she released. But now, every time she feels that ache, she whispers, obedience is worth the pain, because purpose is worth the price, and the peace that follows, it's not fleeting, it's not circumstantial, it's eternal.
Part 5. The pain of long waiting. When God takes His time, it's because what He's building is eternal. She never thought it would take this long. The promise had come years ago, a whisper in prayer, a word from a mentor, a dream that felt so vivid she wrote it down in trembling ink and circled the date. She believed it, prayed into it, fasted for it, declared it. But the days kept passing, within months, though in years, and life stayed the same. No open doors, no breakthroughs, just more waiting. At first, she stayed excited, hopeful, expectant. But over time, the delay became a weight. She smiled through it, but it dulled her. The fire dimmed, the joy faded. She still believed God could do it, she just wasn't sure He still would. Worse, she wasn't sure she'd still be standing when He did. There were nights she sat on the floor by her bed, rocking herself back and forth, whispering the same prayer she'd prayed 100 times. And when God, not even if anymore, she never stopped believing. She just got tired. Tired of hoping. Tired of waiting. Tired of watching everyone else move forward while she stood still. It wasn't envy. She celebrated their blessings. Truly. But she couldn't help but wonder, did I miss it? Did I hear wrong? Am I forgotten? She tried to make peace with the silence. Tried to fill the space with productivity, with purpose, with just be grateful. But some mornings, the ache hit before her feet even touched the floor. The ache of a dream delayed. And then one afternoon, she was journaling again, the pages streaked with tears, when a name dropped into her spirit. The dreamer, the one who saw the vision early, only to be thrown in a pit, sold, enslaved, imprisoned, forgotten. Grace turned to Genesis and read it slowly this time, not just as a story, but as a mirror. And the truth hit her like a sacred whisper. God gave him the dream early, because the preparation would take years. That night, everything shifted. Not her situation, not her timeline, but her perspective. Because maybe the waiting wasn't punishment. Maybe it was protection. Maybe it wasn't a delay, it was deep construction. Maybe the thing she was asking for required strength she didn't even know she needed yet. And slowly, she began to see the hidden gifts in the wilderness. The way her character was being shaped in silence. The way her discernment was sharpening. The way her dependence on God was deepening, not because she had what she wanted, but because He was all she had left. She remembered something someone once told her. God doesn't give heavy promises to people with soft roots. And she began to pray differently. Not just God, make it happen. God, make me ready. God, build the foundation. God, keep me from shortcuts that would sabotage the blessing. Because now she understood, it's not the blessing that's the battle. It's being strong enough to carry it. The waiting didn't get easier overnight, but it became sacred. Each day was no longer lost time. It was training ground. She showed up anyway, prayed anyway, loved anyway, served anyway. Not because she saw the finish line, but because she trusted the one writing the story. And the more she surrendered the timeline, the more her spirit began to breathe again. No longer anxious, no longer trying to force what only heaven could release. She learned that trust isn't proven when the door opens. It's proven when it stays closed and you still praise anyway. One day, as she was walking through the park, Earbuds in, playlist off, she heard it again. Not audibly, just that unmistakable voice in her spirit. What I'm building in you is not momentary. It will touch generations, so I must take my time with you. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't from disappointment. They were from peace, because finally she knew. If it takes longer, it's because it matters more. And now, whenever someone else receives their miracle, she smiles, not with jealousy, but with joy. Because she knows her time is coming, and when it comes, it won't be fragile. It will be holy, rooted, unshakable, because it wasn't built in a moment, it was built in the wait.
Part 6. The pain of not fitting in. Very heaven marks you. The world can't hold you. She'd tried for years to belong, to laugh at what others found funny, to go where they went, wear what they wore, say what they said, to fit in. At work meetings, Bible studies, Sunday brunches, she played the part well, polite, pleasant, composed. But deep inside, her soul never stopped whispering, "This isn't your home." It wasn't that she thought she was better. Not at all. She just felt different, like she was always translating herself into a language no one around her spoke. And the older she got, the harder it became to pretend. She'd sit in a room full of people and feel a sudden wave of silence inside, not around her, but within her. Like her spirit was withdrawing even as her body smiled and nodded. It didn't matter where she was. A team meeting, a family dinner, a small group at church. The ache followed her, and with time it grew louder. You weren't made to blend, you were made to break the pattern. At first she resisted it. She tried harder to belong, read the same books, said the right things, dressed up belonging like it was a coat she could zip up and carry with confidence. But coats don't change your blood, and pretending didn't stop the ache. The truth was, her soul had outgrown what her life was still trying to survive in. No one told her this would be part of the calling, that being chosen sometimes meant being disconnected. That spiritual growth didn't always come with applause. Sometimes it came with silence and stares. She thought something was wrong with her. Why didn't she enjoy what they did anymore? Why did light conversation feel like noise? Why did she grieve the surface when everyone else seemed content to stay there? But now she sees that ache was proof she was awakening. It reminded her of Elijah, the prophet who called down fire and then sat beneath a tree and wept. I am the only one left. 1 Kings 19:10. Even among God's people, Elijah felt alone, isolated, misunderstood, tired of being the only one who felt the weight. Grace read that verse one morning and the tears came fast. I'm not the only one who's felt this. Even the ones God used the most didn't always fit. And something in her settled. She wasn't defective. She was marked. And God was using that sacred discomfort to protect her. Because there were rooms she could not stay in without shrinking. There were conversations that dulled her fire. There were environments that fed her ego but starved her spirit. And God, in His mercy, was making her uneasy in the places that could not carry her destiny. So now she doesn't force her way in. She doesn't explain herself. She doesn't pretend to enjoy what makes her spirit grieve. She walks in truth. She stands in the corner if she has to. She leaves early. She says no without apology. Because belonging to the world would mean betraying what heaven has placed inside her. And that she cannot do. She still has moments where she wishes someone could look at her and just get it. Moments where she feels like an island. Moments where she wonders if maybe she made all this up. But then she remembers, if I fit in there, I'd never be sent here. Because chosen ones aren't shaped in the crowd. They're shaped in the quiet, a straight, a holy disconnect that makes room for divine encounter. And now, when she feels that ache, she doesn't fight it. She honors it, because it's no longer pain, it's proof that she's been set apart. So if you've felt it too, if you've spent your life wondering why no one understands the depth of what you carry, take heart. It's not a curse. It's a crown. And though you may walk alone today, you will lead many tomorrow. Because the ones who never fit were never meant to follow. They were born to carry the fire. Part 7. The pain of unjust opposition. You weren't attacked because you failed. You were attacked because you mattered. She wasn't loud. She didn't seek attention. Bill didn't argue. Didn't try to prove anything to anyone. She simply lived with heart. Quietly, honestly, deeply. But somehow, that was the problem. Somehow, her presence stirred things in people she never meant to provoke. She walked into rooms and felt the atmosphere shift. Not because she said anything, but because her spirit said everything. It started with small things, weird looks, subtle jokes, a co-worker's fake smile that never reached their eyes. Then came the rumors, the passive-aggressive comments, the moments where she could feel the tension before a word was spoken. At first, she blamed herself. Did I come off the wrong way? Did I unintentionally offend someone? Should I tone it down? But she couldn't find the source, only the symptoms. And slowly, she began to realize this wasn't about her personality. This was about her presence. What she carried was holy. And not everyone could stand it. She didn't walk in with pride, she walked in with peace. But peace threatens people who are married to chaos. She didn't flaunt her faith, she just lived it. And that quiet conviction felt like confrontation to those still hiding behind masks. She began to notice a pattern. The more she walked in truth, the more she was opposed. Not for doing wrong, but for refusing to play along. She wouldn't gossip, wouldn't water down her words, wouldn't stay silent when her spirit screamed. And that made her dangerous. There were days it broke her. Days when someone she trusted questioned her intentions. Days when she overheard the mockery. Days when she sat in the car after work, hands shaking, whispering, God, why are they against me when all I've tried to do is walk with you? And in that sacred silence she heard it. You are not hated for what you've done. You are hated for what you represent. Because darkness always resents light. Not because the light attacked, but because the light reveals. Her existence was revealing things in people they weren't ready to confront. Her purity made their compromise uncomfortable. Her peace made their manipulation ineffective. Her growth made their stagnancy obvious. She didn't try to expose them, but presence alone exposes what performance hides. The opposition wasn't random, it was strategic. The enemy doesn't waste energy attacking those who pose no threat. He attacks the ones carrying something he fears. And now she saw it clearly. The pain of unjust opposition was a spiritual indicator, a holy confirmation that she was walking in territory that scared hell itself. David felt it too. Attacked by Saul, misunderstood by family, dismissed by his brothers, not because he was arrogant, but because he carried oil they didn't want to acknowledge. And still he didn't fight back. He waited for God to elevate him. Let the mockers speak. Let the opposition rise. Because David knew, vindication is heaven's job, obedience is ours. So she stopped defending herself, stopped shrinking to make others feel comfortable. She stayed kind, but no longer silent, stayed humble, but no longer hidden, because now she understood. The attacks weren't personal. They were prophetic. She didn't need to explain her calling to people who were never assigned to walk with her. She didn't need applause to confirm her anointing. She just kept walking, wounded but wise, leading but building, misunderstood but marked, because some of God's greatest warriors don't wear armor. They wear scars, that when she lies down at night after the long day, the subtle slights, the heavy silence, she doesn't ask God to take the pain away anymore. She just whispers, use it. Use every rejection, every lie, every attack. Use it to sharpen me, to refine me, to stretch me, to prepare me to carry what you placed inside me without apology, because now she sees it clearly. The battle isn't proof I'm weak. The battle is proof I'm chosen. The day it all made sense. Every scar was a scroll. Every ache was an answer. Every pain was a prophecy. It didn't happen with lightning, not with fireworks, not with a divine visitation. It happened one ordinary morning, the kind where nothing special was supposed to unfold. She woke up like always, made her tea, opened her journal, but something felt different. The air wasn't heavy anymore. The ache, the one that used to greet her before her feet touched the floor, was gone. Or maybe it had become something else. Not numbness, not forgetfulness, but understanding. She opened to a fresh page, and instead of writing questions like she had every day for the last year, her pen began to move with clarity. The isolation was how you taught me to hear you. The loneliness was how you pulled me into deeper intimacy. The inner war proved I still cared. The renunciations made space for what you were building. The waiting stretched my roots. The not fitting in protected my assignment. The opposition showed I carried something real. And suddenly, every pain that once felt random, cruel, unexplainable, came together like pieces in a holy mosaic. Each one had been an altar. Each one had carried a secret instruction. She remembered the nights she almost gave up, the mornings she cried before brushing her teeth, the rooms she left early, the phone calls she never returned because she didn't have the words to explain her ache. She remembered the silence, the strange looks, the inner war, the sacrifices. And instead of grieving those moments, she blessed them, because now she saw them for what they really were. Preparations, refinings, proof that she was marked, not because of what she'd done, but because of what heaven saw in her from the beginning. She wasn't being punished. She was being positioned. She wasn't overlooked. She was being hidden until the time was right. And now, she was no longer bitter. She was ready, not for fame, not for applause, but for purpose, for impact, for the assignment that can't be bought, imitated, or downloaded. It's the kind of assignment that requires a wilderness degree, the kind that only the broken, healed, and refined can carry. And as she closed her journal that morning, she whispered into the quiet, "Thank you for every tear. Thank you for the people who left. Thank you for the silence, the waiting, the breaking. Because without them, she never would have become who she is now. Not bitter, not proud, but full of God. So if you're still in the middle of it, if your desert hasn't yet turned to garden, if you still don't understand why the pain hit you so hard, so often, so young, let this be the letter you needed. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not crazy for feeling different. You are not weak because you still feel pain. You're chosen, and chosen people carry crosses no one else sees, because they're also called to release glory no one else can carry. You may walk through fire, but you will come out as gold, because what God is doing through you isn't just for now, it's for generations. The sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. If you've walked through the fire and didn't quit, if you've cried in silence but still chose to believe, if this story sounded less like content and more like confirmation, then you're not watching this by accident. You were summoned, because chosen ones don't just survive, they rise. And if you're still standing, heaven saw it. Drop a comment below and write, "I was marked, and I'm still standing." Share this video with someone else who's been walking through the fire. Sometimes the confirmation they need comes through you. And if this message touched your soul, and you believe others need to hear it too, you can support this sacred mission through the link in the description. Not as a donation, but as a seed sown in faith. Because every story like this isn't built by hype, it's built by heaven. And heaven always finishes what it starts.